Andrew Bailey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to be talking on the second reading of the Taxation, Resident Withholding Tax and GST on Online Services and Student Loans Bill. And very nice that the previous speaker agrees with much of what we're trying to achieve here, and thank him for that contribution. Of course, as we've all heard, this is an omnibus bill and covers three key aspects: resident withholding tax, GST aspects and student loans. So I want to focus a little bit on the GST, but it's just worthwhile just going back with regard to the resident withholding tax element of this bill. And Mr Speaker, I just think it's worthwhile reminding people that this is actually the third leg of their treble. We've already brought into play the bright line test. We've brought in the requirement for to get an IRD number and a bank account number. And of course, this is the third bit, which is around the resident withholding tax, and to make sure that New Zealand is actually able to capture the tax that is due to New Zealand or inland revenue. And it's a prudent measure in terms of putting in place a mechanism that collects the money at the time of sale, and that the conveyancer does that on behalf of the government and does it in a way that means that sufficient money is kept in New Zealand when there is a foreign buyer involved in selling residential land. And I think it's a very pragmatic step. A lot of people said, well, it doesn't raise any money. That's not the intent of this part of the treble. It's about putting in place a package that means that for foreign owners buying residential land, there is now a good cascade of legislation to make sure that those transactions are handled in an appropriate way. If they are selling residential property within 2 years, they do have to pay tax, and we've got a record of who's buying and selling. In terms of the GST element, Mr Speaker, I think this is a very good piece of work, particularly with the help from the officials. We are obviously trying to even up the playing field for the retail sector in New Zealand, an important part of our economy and business. And of course, what we're trying to do here is to deal in a pragmatic way about how goods that or services are provided by offshore entities to New Zealand businesses. And I think it's important to note this is focused on B2B, business to business, and to make sure that those foreign firms, if they are selling their services or goods in New Zealand, they should include in that purchase price the GST. And that should be payable to New Zealand. And of course, what we put in place is a minimum threshold. That means that if a foreign business is selling more than $60,000 a year, then they will have to register. And of course, that means that there's an account of that. And for those types of services, loosely described as remote services, and I think it's just worthwhile just talking about what we mean by remote services. These include both digital, and the previous speaker, Grant, spoke about this, video, music, software, and more traditional services, including legal and accounting or advisory skills. And so it's really important that we put in place these measures, and it's all part of that move towards making sure that New Zealand businesses and retailers can compete. So I think it's a very good omnibus bill, Mr Speaker, and I thoroughly commend it. Thank you very much.